Hey guys, Nanman here, and we're doing another episode of Modern Meta Breakdown. I've got Malcolm joining me today. So we missed out last week. We're kind of busy doing real life stuff, and I know some people have been asking about this deck. It's been kind of not really on most people's radars for a while. Sort of fallen off, but still a powerful deck. Like, it does really well when there's a lot of mid-rangey decks like Jund or Abzan and stuff like that. It has that kind of go-wide strategy. So we're going to talk about kind of two different styles that you can play when you're rocking out the black-white tokens. I know some people have tried like Mardu tokens, and they've tried some different styles, but this is kind of the classic tried and true version of it. The lists that I'm going to be showing today do not have Fatal Push in them, but we'll talk about how that can easily be ported in if that's what you want to run. So, first things first, though, guys, let's showcase the list, shall we? Bam! We got it going. Alright, so here's the list. This is kind of the first version that we're going to discuss. This is the one that is running creatures. So there's essentially two different versions that you can run. You can run the creature version, which runs our Auric champion, or you can run the non-creature version, which usually keeps the champions like in the board or something like that, because it's actually really smart to run the creatures in your 75. So let's start off with the creature itself. Champion's a human cleric, costs double white for a 1/1, but quite relevant, does have protection from red and black, and whenever another creature comes into play, you gain a life. So this is not just your creatures, but your opponent's creatures. So that does work out really nicely because you're generating a lot of creatures. So you're going to be able to gain a bunch of life and stay alive. So that works out really well. So you see 3 are in this list. It makes a lot of sense why you would be running it. Now, there is one other creature that you sometimes see from time to time, and that's our Hero of the Bladehold. Costs 4 mana for 3/4 with Battle Cry, which is nice. Whenever he attacks, of course, gives all other attacking creatures +1/+0, and then when he attacks, or she attacks, sorry, you also get to put 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens on the battlefield tapped and attacking. You can stack those triggers, so the soldiers will enter, and then Battle Cry trigger will go off. Now, most people are not running the hero anymore because we have enough 4-drops, and so we don't really need to rely on Hero of Bladehold to get there anymore. Before, you would see lists because they didn't really care about Gideon, didn't really care about Sorin. We needed some extra stuff in there. Now, really, the Planeswalkers is kind of the way to go, so you won't really see very many, but it's still a preference thing. If you want to have like a 1 of, a 2 of in there, you go for it. You do you. So that is kind of creature-wise. We wanted to discuss that real quick. Going past the creatures, we have all of our Planeswalkers. So this list is running Liliana the Veil, a little bit more control aspect to it, making people discard cards. You can have them sack creatures. Seems pretty good. Sorin, Solemn Visitor, is like a staple for black-white tokens. The life gain aspect to it works out well. You can generate tokens off of -2, so all of these are great. But really, the +1 is very relevant because it's until your next turn. So this +1/+0 and lifelink continues during your opponent's turn. So that could affect how they attack, things like that. And with you losing life off of one of your creature generators, that lifelink is quite relevant. So that's why you see there's so many Sorins in these black-white lists that are running around. But I like having the lilies in there. I've tried out without lilies. I've tried them with lilies. I personally like having Lily in there. That extra control is pretty nice. So I like that aspect. Now, there are some other Planeswalkers. Let's pull them up. Okay, here's the 4 big ones when you're going to be playing tokens, right? We talked about Lily, talked about Sorin. We've also got Elspeth, Knight Errant. I like it. I used to run a 1 of in my list. I like having that aspect in there. Cost 4 for Elspeth there for 4 loyalty Planeswalker. +1, you get a 1/1 white soldier. Sweet, we're talking about generating tokens. This works out great. +1, give target creature +3/+3 and flying until the end of turn. So you're essentially saying, oh, that 1/1 soldier is now a 4/4 flying and I can get over top of you. Right? If the board's gummed up and we can't get through, we have some evasion with Elspeth. And then -8, you know, you're for the rest of the game, artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and lands that you control are indestructible. That isn't really something that's going to happen quite often. Really, it's going to be that kind of +3 or make a token with Elspeth. But, you know, that's another preference thing. I think 1 is fine. I don't think you should be running more than 1 for Elspeth, but that's, again, preference. Gideon on the other side there is amazing. I'm a big fan of Gideon in the tokens list. Another 4 cost, 4 loyalty Planeswalker. +1, of course, Gideon becomes that 5/5 indestructible creature, and you can prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. -0 there, so just zero it out. You get a 2/2 white knight, so that's pretty sweet. 2/2 creature. Or -4, which would just alt it right at the beginning there. You get an emblem with creatures you control, get +1/+1. So if your strategy is to go wide, buffing up all your creatures works really well. So basically saying, here's 4 mana, all of my creatures for the rest of the game are going to be +1/+1. But really, you can kind of get away with saying, you know what, I can +1 him now that I have some tokens out. He'll be fine. He'll have 5 loyalty. Then next turn, I can be able to ult him, keep him alive. So it's, you know, I like Gideon a lot for that aspect of it. So I wanted to show the different Planeswalkers, and we'll talk about them more when we're showcasing the next list. Talking about the lands, 24 lands, this is actually pretty solid. You could do some adjustments to the lands that you're running, but the utility lands that we've got here, Vault of the Archangel, amazing for this deck. Creatures you control get Death Touch and Lifelink. So again, we were talking about how important that Lifelink is with the way the deck is set up. Very, very relevant. Death Touch is nice too, because if you're playing against something that might have bigger creatures, you know, being able to just kill them off with your 1/1s or 2/2 tokens, yes, works out great. Also makes for combat math a little bit more difficult and blocking and stuff like that with your opponents and stuff, and how they have to kind of sequence things there. Another lifelink man land we've got here is Shambling Vents. This is our single land that we've got that will enter tapped, essentially, because the other ones should be able to enter untapped unless you choose not to, but this one has to enter tapped. But I like this in there. I've done some adjustments and not run a full play set. I've kind of shaved down to like 2 or 3 personally, because there are some relevant plays that you could do on turn 1. So it can slow you down by having more Shambling Vents, but it's a really good card, right? Of course, we got a Marsh Flats, gonna be fetching here. Find a Plains or Swamp, works out great. Play set a Godless Shrine, yep. Okay, there's our Shockland, sweet. Isolated Chapel, I love it. Buddy Up, yeah, works great. Caves of Kozilek, again, that's preference. Like, Caves works out pretty nicely. Taps for a colorless, or you can lose a life and get a white or black to your mana pool. There's a play set in there. You could also go for like the Filter Land. You could also add some more Isolated in there, more basics. You know, you decide. Add more fetch lands too, Windswept Heath, things like that. So 2 swamps, 3 plains in there. Gotta have those basics, right? There's Blood Moons running around. So there's kind of our land base. Now, spells, we break it down into kind of 3 categories, right? Token generators, removal, and disruption. So let's talk disruption, and that's kind of our turn 1 plays that we're going to do. Kind of works well with Liliana with that sort of disruption play. We've got play set of Thoughtseize in here. Okay, remember what that does. Opponent reveals their hand. You can choose a non-land card from it, and that gets discarded. You also have to lose 2 life. Okay, play set, and there's nice. We've also got 3 Inquisition of Kozilek. Does the same thing as Thoughtseize, except the non-land card has to be converted mana cost 3 or less. Alright, cool. Makes sense. So with these 2, this is kind of where you can do that adjustment, right? I think Thoughtseize is the easiest one to say, I'm going to shrink down the number of Thoughtseize that I have main board, and I'll put them and into my sideboard. And you could do that, and you could say, you know what, I'll run 2 Thoughtseize so I can port in 2 Fatal Push into my list. Makes sense. Cool. We can make that work, right? So the next set we have is sort of removal. And the big one, since we don't have Fatal Push in here, is our playset of Path to Exile, right? Path to Exile is sweet. Everyone should know it. If you're playing Modern, you exile a creature. Its controller can search his or her library for basic land card, and then they put that on the battlefield tapped. All right, cool. Get rid of all those big dumb dudes kind of thing. Also, some people have been running Dismembers. Some people have been running... Malcolm's moving around, sorry. Murderous Cut, things like that. But really, that's kind of the way to go. Now we have our token generators. Well, okay, Intangible Virtue kind of is not really fits into those 3 categories, but I kind of buddy it up with the token generators because it just kind of goes along with it. So really, you kind of want to hope for a Inquisition or Thoughtseize turn 1, turn 2, Intangible Virtue, turn 3, play your token generators. Unless you happen to have a Bitter Blossom, then play Bitter Blossom turn 2. But let's start with Bitter Blossom, right? Got unbanned years ago. Pretty sweet. Sometimes you'll see some actual just straight up fairy lists running it. Beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life. You have to lose a life. You cannot miss that. Put a 1/1 Black Fairy rogue creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Right? So that's way to constantly generate creatures during your turn. And that's why that life link is so important with the Auroch Champion. Basically counteracts Bitter Blossom. Because every creature you gain a life. Well, guess what? Got a token. Cool. Counteract that. Sorin, lifelink until my next turn. Nice. Works out great. We've also got Timely Reinforcement, which works well with Bitter Blossom because you can gain life. If you have less life than your opponent, you'll gain 6. If you have less creatures than your opponent, you get 3 1/1 white soldier tokens. So I like having this main board. I used to run a single main board and an extra in the board because, hey, guess what? You're going to lose a lot of life, especially with Thoughtseize, Bitter Blossoms, things like that. The next ones, most common people think about Lingering Souls. Yes. Right, this is what I want to be doing. I have pay 3 mana, get 2 1/1 white flying spirits, and then guess what? Later on, if the game's gone on long and grindy, I can just pay 2, and now I've got more spirits. So, like that plan a lot. Spectral Possession's another great one. You have to pay 3 white though. Otherwise, the card costs more. If you're not using white, it costs 2 mana, so you can have it be up to 6 mana, which is bleh. Nobody wants to do that. We'll pay 3. But you get 3 spirits off of this one. So that's another sweet one to be able to run, right? Just kind of flood the board with spirits and just go over top of your opponent. Next, we've got Secure the Waste. So this is a nice one to add in, especially if it's kind of those more grindy matchups. Say on your end step there, this is instant speed. Most of the other ones are sorcery speed. I can sit there and say, all right, I'll tap my 4 mana and just now I've got 3 soldiers or something like that. Or I'll tap 6 because it's gone long and grindy and we can be able to get a bunch of soldiers now. So I like having 2 in there. But again, you can adjust the numbers for that. Sideboard can easily be tweaked and adjusted. Like I like Pithing Needle. Ratchet Bomb's pretty sweet. Sculler's nice. Ghostly Prison, if you kind of want to be able to do that, because it affects you. Creatures can't attack you unless they pay 2 for each creature. So if it's like an aggro deck, something like that, you know what? Let's slow them down a bit. Rest in Peace, kind of anti-graveyard stuff. Stony Silence, we know. Artifacts, cool. Worship, love it. You're going to have creatures. You shouldn't be able to die, right? Should help you out unless they have a bunch of board wipes and then you're, well, sorry. If you control a creature, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. So that works out well to help keep you alive. Celestial Purge, anti-red, anti-black, just exile it. Could be creature, could be planeswalker, whatever. It's permanent. Dismember, we were talking about more removal. It's got 2 in the board there. Sundering Growth, anti-artifact, anti-enchantment, and then you get a populate, so you get an extra token off of it. And then another Timely Reinforcement. So again, you get the kind of idea of how you have to set up your spells. There's a lot of flexibility with numbers. Some people have started to shave down a little bit of the spectral possessions, maybe to add in more planeswalkers, different things like that. Champion's nice, but we're going to showcase a list that doesn't have the Auroch Champion main board. So this one, we're looking at Duress right now, is running the Gideon. Now it is running only one Gideon, and again, you can adjust your numbers accordingly, but 5 planeswalkers is nice. And you have to think when you're playing this deck, 4 is my top end, right? That is how I need to go. But optimally, I need at least 3 mana to be able to get going and do the things that I need to do. Most of my token generators cost 3 mana, so I need to kind of keep that in mind going forward there. But 4 is the top end. We're fine with 4, and you can see 24 lands works out pretty nice. We talked about having extra fetches in there. This is kind of where we've opted for. Arid Mesas, Bloodstained Mires, okay, cool. Fetch for a white source, fetch for a black source. Fetid Heath, we talked about the filter land. You can get double white, double black, white and a black. It's up to you. This also is running Ghost Quarters, which is nice to have that utility in there, but you have to be careful with running too many utility lands that do not tap for mana, because some of your stuff like Spectral Possession are very mana intensive with the stuff that you need. So just be aware of that going forward if you're going to be building this list. Again, playset of Godless Shrine for Marsh Flats. This is what I like to see. Less Shambling Vents. 2 Shambling Vents, great. Opting for 1 Vault this time because, hey, we need those utility lands of Ghost Quarters. Maybe there's more Tron in your meta. Seems fine. The Windbrisk Heights is our hideaway land that you'll often see in tokens. Now, when it enters the battlefield, you get a look at the top 4 cards of your library. Exile 1 card face down. Put the rest in the bottom of your library. This taps for a white, so that helps us out. Now, if you attack with 3 creatures or more, so Spectral Possession, you attack with all 3 of those, guess what? We're going to be able to activate this. 1 white, we get to cast whatever that is. So if we hid our Sorin, our Lily, our Gideon underneath Windbrisk Height, we can sit there and attack and be able to just activate, and boom, now we have a Planeswalker for 1 mana. So that, I like that idea of having the Windbrisk. I think just a singleton is fine. Do not run more than that because it is, again, a land that enters tapped. So you have to keep that in mind going into this route. So I like this sort of idea. Now, I also forgot to mention, I think, in the first list, Intangible Virtue not only gives our tokens +1/+1, but also gives them Vigilance, which is very relevant when it comes to, hey, I want to be aggressive, I want to chip away at you, but I also need to have my guys on blocking duty to protect my Planeswalkers. So that lets you kind of pull double duty with that. So Tangible Virtue, great card. You guys should be playing it if you're playing tokens. So again, Disruption, 4 Inquisitions, 3 Thoughtseize, a little bit less Thoughtseize, but again, you can even adjust it more. I liked having 4 Bitter Blossoms, so I liked having less Thoughtseize. I think I did 4 and 2 when I was running my list, because that 2 life is relevant, and you're going to lose a lot of life every turn for Bitter Blossom. But you see 2 Timely in here, gain some life off of that, gain some creatures off that, works out well. 3 Spectral, 4 Lingering Souls, always, always, always have 4 Lingering Souls, regardless of what version of black-white tokens you're running. This is like number one. Need that. So, removal, we have more removal this time around. 4 Path, okay, yes, I'm running white, I need 4 Path, cool. Running that Murderous Cut, running 2 Dismember. So, again, I like Murderous Cut because you're filling your graveyard full of all this stuff that just becomes fuel for cut. But Fatal Push can work out well, so you can easily just say, you know what, Murderous Cut, don't need you anymore. Fatal Push, you'll be in here. Shave down on 1 more Thoughtseize, put another Fatal Push in there. I like Dismembers a lot. -5 is nice. But you can say, hey, there's not as much stuff that I need to worry about with this. I'll keep 1 Dismember main board and add another Fatal Push, and then you'll be up to 3. You could do things like that. We do see in the board, though, the champions are there, which is nice. Relic is kind of extra graveyard hate. Cool. Now, there is additional disruption with the Duress. I like it. You know, you want to kind of go that route, you can go that route. Now, Zealous Persecution sometimes gets seen in main board. It is a really good got you card, like, because you could sit there and be like, oh sweet, okay, I'm going to electrolyze, I'm going to lightning bolt, I'm going to do this thing to kill off your guys or whatever. I'll do Anger of the Gods or something like that and wipe your board, and all of your 3/3 tokens that you have, because you've got Intangible Virtue and you have the Gideon emblem, are all going to die. Well, guess what? All of my creatures get +1/+1, and all of your creatures get -1/-1. This also messes up math for a lot of players too, when they're like, okay, I don't have to block this turn because maybe I'll have one extra turn kind of thing if you're going all out, and you can just sit there and blow somebody out with Zealous Persecution. You also used to see more of these when there was like Infect and other things running around more often, because that -1 is a pretty nice board wipe style of thing that you could be able to do once they start getting up, because it can kill their nobles, it can kill their blighted agents, things like that. So I like having a singleton. I think it's nice, but again, not as relevant now since a lot of things are really big. But if you want to go sort of more of that surprise factor, it's a nice way to go. So here's kind of the basic idea behind the list, right? We get to see what's going on. We know how the list is going to be working. 4 mana is kind of our top end for it. Kind of more mid-rangey, grindy, and it does better grinding against mid-range decks too, because like if we're sitting here and playing these singleton creatures and stuff like that and trying to disrupt you and trying to pick apart your stuff, your spells in this deck are more relevant later on because yours are going to be generating more creatures. So if we got to this point and we're kind of stalemated out and we keep killing each other's stuff and nobody can land something, well, now I just made 3 creatures. And because it's gone on long and grindy, here's my Intangible Virtue, here's my emblem, right? I'm set up nicely that my creatures that I've got now are 3/3s, and they have Vigilance. And oh, guess what? I have a Vault of Archangel out, so now they have lifelink too. Bitter Blossom constantly generating creatures every single turn. So it's a really fun deck to play. But again, it does suffer from that aspect of it doesn't really have that Pierce style. It's all about going wide. So if you're playing against something that has a lot of ways to deal with those go wide strategies, whether it's like Anger of the Gods, whether it's Supreme Verdict, Damnation, things like that, those board wipes, you're going to have a hard time. Also, a very quick aggressive deck might be able to get in there and get going very quick before you're ready for it. So you have to be careful. Something like Boggles, for instance, right? This Build-A-Bear style that has the ability to get trample for their creatures, and even though it's just one creature and you can be like, I've got chump blockers all day, this will be great, until they start trampling over you, and then you're just sort of like, well, that was fun and all, but now I just take 7 damage off that one block. So it's easier to be able to deal with that sort of stuff when you're playing that mid-rangey style. You can play against, alright, we're both sort of kind of going wide, I can deal with this, no problem. Disruption doesn't matter as much if you're able to land something like Bitter Blossom, or just kind of wait it out, keep your removal available, that you can kind of get to that longer, grindier games where this deck does benefit. Now, Control does kind of have a field day with this deck, because it's like, alright, I can sit and wait, because you can set yourself up nicely, but every time you try to generate a creature off of your spells, I'll just counter those, right? So that does cause some issues if you're playing against Control, and I know there is a little bit more Control starting to pop up, and combo decks just kind of laugh at it because it's a little too slow. So if you're playing against Scape Shift and stuff like that, you're not going to have a good time, which there's a lot of Scape Shift running around, so just be careful about what your meta looks like and when to really start playing this deck. But it's fun. I loved it. I loved playing the Planeswalker version. I think 5 is great. You could try to sneak in 6, but that's really pushing it based on the top end on how you want to go for this deck. So But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Modern Meta Breakdown. Let me know if there's any other decks that you'd like to see. We're going to keep bouncing around. There's lots of other decks to talk about. We're getting into spoiler season for Ixalan. Dinosaurs, yes. So excited. More Merfolk. There's a sweet one that I'm going to be trying to port in, maybe replace Kira with from the sideboard and stuff. So lots of cool stuff coming. We're going to be doing another podcast coming up soon, talking about the spoilers for Ixalan. So keep your guys' eyes peeled. Twitter will be announcing when that will be taking place. Modern Magic Mondays is going to be returning for season 6, I think. I think we're on 6. Yeah, that sounds about right. Season 6, coming in September. So keep your eyes peeled as well for that sort of stuff. Also, if you guys have been enjoying, we've been doing our Diablo uploads to YouTube at the beginning of the week on Mondays. We're going to start doing some StarCraft Remastered content coming up soon. Been having a blast with the game, been doing lots of that. Also been playing a lot of PUBG, so maybe there'll be some PUBG stuff in the future. Just getting you guys up to date on what's going on. So again, beginning of the week, it's all of our newer non-Magic related stuff. End of the week, Thursdays, that sort of stuff, is all of our Magic related content, with the exception of Modern Magic Mondays, that you guys can be able to check all that stuff down in the description and stuff if you have not seen any of that yet. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you guys next game.